Commission meeting for April 28th, 2014 is called to order. Are there any public comments on items that are not on the agenda for the evening?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for taking the time. Laura promised that I could take about 3 minutes of your time to talk through a project here. So my name is John Lewis. I'm the Public Works Director, and I just wanted to share with you the map that I just handed with you is what we're calling the Lynn Leland Myers concept plan. And we're taking a look at a variety of things along that corridor, everything from sewer, lack of sewer on what would be the south end along Myers Road to pedestrian and bicycle improvements along the entire corridor. So the idea would be we would develop a plan that would be aligned with our transportation system plan, but it would be essentially an amendment. It would further define what the concept might look like if we were to design a bike-friendly, pedestrian-friendly corridor along that entire route. So I wanted to share it with you as just public information tonight. Tony and I talked about us being able to get on your June 13th, I think? June 16th work session. Did we hit that right? Yeah. So June 16th work session where we'll bring, we've hired Wallace to do the concept plan on this, Wallace Engineering, so we'll be bringing them along with us to share some of the ideas and some of the, by that time we should have a lot more public comment on the plan. And so tonight I just kind of wanted to introduce it, wanted to tell you a little bit about a couple of the boards that we've created. So, Lita, I'm going to stick these right in front of you here, sorry. So we've basically split that alignment into 4 segments. Segment starts down at Jackson and 5th and goes, the first segments we've stopped at Park Street. And then from Park to Warner Milne, Warner Parrott, that's segment number 2. And then from that location out to where Claremont and Leland Road come together, that's segment number 3. And then the remainder out to Moccasin on Myers Road would be segment number 4. And really the most pressing segment, at least that's what we're kind of hearing, is this first segment from 5th to Park, and just the concerns with the curvature of the road through there and the lack of bicycle facilities and pedestrian facilities. So we're looking at what that section could look like. We're also looking at a lot of neighborhood connectivity that might make sense in that corridor. As you know, there's Singer Park there, and Pearl Street comes down. There's a couple other neighborhood parks, obviously Waterboard Park, so there's not real good connectivity in the neighborhood. So we're looking pretty hard at what might make sense, things that are probably on the small scale that wouldn't necessarily be listed in the transportation system plan, but that might help connect some of the existing paths that are in Singer Park. And we're also kind of looking at how we could improve pedestrian access from kind of this segment to the next segment, which, sorry about that for you people in the audience, but maybe you can make that one that way. Also looking at Gardner Middle School and some of our conversations over the past few years about how to better serve pedestrians in some of the side routes between Lynn Avenue and the school, where there's no sidewalks right now. So trying to figure out, how to get better sidewalk connectivity there. As you know, with the buses, it's a little challenging. If I were a parent, I probably wouldn't want to send my middle schooler down some of those routes. And then also maybe connecting up Park Place and that neighborhood with routes that would get students to Gardner Middle School. So not only we're looking at the corridor, we're kind of looking at some of these other pedestrian connections, and with a plan to hopefully kind of prioritize those and get public comment from the community about which, if they were king for a day, where would they spend their pedestrian and bike lane dollars. And then last but definitely not least, one of the projects that's on our transportation system plan is a roundabout at Warner Parrott and Warner Milne, Leland Road, Central Point, and Lynn Avenue, how to tie all that together. So we've had some concept work in the works for years, And this project isn't necessarily going to design those, but we're going to have those. We're going to get a little further down the concept plan process. So we're looking at that. We're wanting to talk to property owners that would be impacted by this kind of a solution. And so, again, that's all. The idea would be to wrap all that into a concept plan that would not necessarily ensure that it's constructed, but it would help us with receiving grants. It would help us if the development community were to come in with a development proposal, let's say a police station, and maybe exact out of them definitely the right of way, maybe some of the improvements, and that corridor plan definitely helps with implementation of those kind of things. And when a developer comes in, you can refer to these, we can refer to these plans, and exact some of those improvements from the developer. So it's a lower level in terms of review than the transportation system plan. That's a pretty high level review. This is a refinement of that, but it's definitely not detailed construction plans. And there's no guarantees we'll find funding for this, but we think we could be successful with that. This corridor is a heavily used bike and ped facility. It's just people don't like to use it because there's some problems associated with it. So those are the things that I just wanted to introduce. The hope would be that the more we share with you, the more efficient it'll move through the land use approval process. We see our consultant time is expensive, and we like to try to minimize that when we can. So our initial thought is we do a work session with you folks, and then 2 planning commission hearings to get that plan adopted, and then 2 city commission, adopted at this commission, and then adopted through the planning commission with a couple more meetings. So that's what we're hoping for.
So this would be an amendment to the transportation plan?
I guess it's a supplement to it. It's not really an
Supplement.
amendment. Well, the transportation plan will continue to be what it is. This will just be a supplementary ancillary document that would also be referred to like any of our other planning documents that we have.
Be looked at as a specific plan.
So to
So
me,
a lot more specific.
Yeah, it seems to me it'd be you'd reference it, but it'd be in the appendix as the more detailed. So in a way, it is kind of in addition to the transportation systems plan.
I see it similar to the South End plan or any of other concept plans. It's we don't amend those to the transportation system plan. This would be just another plan, just like we've got a Malal Avenue concept plan. And if we redo the transportation system plan and we have this, we'd probably refer to that, although it's brand new, so it may be a while. So, yeah, that's the idea.
So let me ask you a question that was asked at our neighborhood meeting when this was introduced. Is will this plan have, or is it the purpose of the plan to reduce the negative impacts by automobiles on particularly the Lynn, on the whole segment?
The negative impacts of automobiles. Well,
Yeah, I'm just saying it in a much nicer way.
Okay.
Because that area is heavily impacted by automobiles, which makes it undesirable for walking and bicycling, with my favorite word of the day, speed.
Right. So I think what we'll see, because most of those improvements especially along the first segment, which is again between 5th and Park, because of the topography there, even if we wanted more right-of-way, it's really not cost effective to take more right-of-way to build a wider boulevard. So I think what you're going to see is travel lanes that will feel a little narrower. There'll be raised sidewalk. One of the questions we have is, should there be sidewalks on both sides of Lynn, or should we look at a wider shared use path on one side of Lynn? But in either situation, there'd be a feeling of constrained lanes, which to me means people are likely to drive slower on them. We've also got some ideas about pedestrian crossings that would activated pedestrian crossings, so a pedestrian could come and hit the button and see flashing activated. Those kinds of measures are things that we would recommend. Whether we can fund all those things is a question, but I definitely think having a raised curb and sidewalk in that same roadway section that we live with today would, for most drivers, would mean a narrower road segment
All right, that'll,
which typically means slower speeds.
yeah, that would reduce some of the negative impacts.
Yeah.
And then you started to talk about it briefly, but so of course the $64,000 question is, where are we going to try to get the dollars for this besides grants? And we have so many other priorities. And I guess one of the things that I'm hoping we'll discuss on the Planning Commission level is, how this fits into the bigger picture of the funding situation that we have currently and what we might anticipate in the future. Is that something we can have a discussion about?
Well, I
Not
guess I looked
tonight,
to Tony.
at our work session.
Is that the role of this body? I'm not so sure, but it's definitely it's pretty obvious that we've got more needs than we have funding for. So, is this corridor a higher priority than another corridor, say 99E? Do we need to spend more money there? Where do we do that? We think, based on the fact that we're taking on this concept plan and leaving several other concept plans off the table, means that this is a higher priority project. We know when we built the curbs and the drainage systems along Leland Road between Warner Parrott and Claremont, we got a lot of feedback about the fact that they would have liked to have seen more sidewalk along there. And so we kind of heard that. We've heard from our existing city commission that the alignment from Park down to Fifth is just terrible. It needs to change. And so we're basing that based on what we're kind of hearing from the community and the city commission.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to a more robust discussion later on.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
I think you raise a good point, John. Separation of responsibility in terms of whether or not funding would be a responsibility for discussion by the Planning Commission. And frankly, I don't think it is. I think the responsibility lies with the Commission. We can give them advice, and they can either consent or not.
That's right.
The funding is a political animal, really, in my judgment. Leave it up to the policymakers.
You misunderstood, Bob. What my question was is I was trying to get a better understanding of where this was going to fit into the funding priorities. I'm not interested in discussing funding, but obviously John has some ideas, and I think that would be helpful for us to know that if we're going to be making a recommendation to the City Commission. So I'm not saying we're going to solve that problem. I'm just saying I think it's part of the discussion, not that we're going to solve it.
Okay, so you'll come back on June 16th. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the June 16th date is one of our off Mondays, so usually we have our hearings on the 2nd and the 4th.
So
Mondays.
This will be a bonus meeting.
This
for
will be a
us.
bonus one unless we have some hearings drop off
Nice.
at that time.
I will not be present because it wasn't scheduled.
I know. That's what I'm doing.
It'll be the work session, so we'll have another opportunity during the
Yeah.
hearings.
No, and it always gets recorded, and I get to sit there
get to watch it.
with my popcorn. Yes.
Yeah, I think if that's a problem, we're flexible. We can be flexible. We don't, I'll work with Tony on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next item on our agenda is the PC 14-035 Portland Metro Men's Center Conditional Use Permit CU 13-01 Site Plan and Design Review SP 13-11 and Lot Line Abandonment LL 13-04. And I have been instructed that I need to read the quasi-judicial hearing script and procedures for this hearing this evening. The public hearing on land use application that's scheduled this evening, a staff report has been prepared for this application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the public hearing. The staff report identifies approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart on the wall, which is what we'll be following this evening. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name, and testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they are applicable under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the staff, the city staff, while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony to keep the record open in response to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court. We will now open the record, and this is a continued hearing from the previous hearings for PC 14035 and the other ones that I've already named. Do any of the commissioners have any ex parte or other items to declare any site visits since the last hearing on this matter?
I do. On, well, I'm not sure what day it was, but about a week ago, I went to the business of Oregon City Garbage Company to pay my bill and to get some new service, and the person at the reception desk expressed some concerns to me about this particular application, and I indicated to her that there was going to be an additional public hearing and that she was more than welcome to attend.
Okay. Anyone else? And I have none. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the commissioners on their declarations?
You have to come up to the podium. You want to come up? I was sick and had some dental work before the two meeting. But so,
Ma'am, you need to give your name for the record.
Jeannie Barksdale. JINNYBARKSDALE. I live 106.
That's fine, you just need to tell us your name.
And,
Because that's
And this is not
that-
testimony.
and
That's very important because I live just behind them.
so
Yes.
you're do you have any questions for any of the commissioners regarding their declarations? That's what
Yes,
we're talking
I just have asked a question. I want to say something.
We're
I
not
was-
taking testimony at this time.
Oh, okay. Then I
Yeah.
just go
You-
back.
you-
Sorry.
You'll be able to, just
In a
make sure
minute.
you get a piece of paper over to, there's a form that.
Right,
I'll
you'll
leave
need
it.
to sign up and give your paper to the staff person.
Okay.
But you'll get to talk.
I got a
next week.
chance. to
Yeah, he
talk.
hasn't
Okay.
opened the public hearing yet. He's asking
Oh,
if
sorry.
we have
Sorry.
if the audience has
okay.
questions for us. Yeah, that's okay.
Concerning Ms.
Ma'am?
McGriff's declaration that she was approached at B&B Leasing about this issue, would anybody like to question her on that encounter that she had that she just disclosed? Seeing none?
Seeing none, we'll proceed. You want to
Good
give us
evening.
a staff update?
Laura Turway, planner with the city. Since we've sent out the agenda last week, we received a request for continuance from the applicant to June 9th, 2014, as well as an extension to the 120 date, an additional 42 days, which is the time between now and then. Staff supports the continuance request. At this time, the request will provide time for us to address any concerns related to sewer capacity. There is a stack of information which is new, which was not on the agenda, to be entered into the record tonight. There's extra copies in the back as well for the audience. So it will be put on the next Planning Commission agenda, but it is just to provide some supplemental information so you know what we're working on. And that's it.
June 9th?
June 9th.
Which I will be here for.
Which you will be here for, okay. And just to clarify, the applicant does have the opportunity to request a continuance. Obviously, we have a legal requirement to issue a decision within a certain amount of time, essentially our 120-day rule. As part of the request, they did, as Ms. Turaway explained, extend that 120 decision by an additional 42 days, which puts it out to approximately September 11th, to allow enough time for a decision by the Planning Commission, and if there is an appeal, for the City Commission to make a decision within that time period.
So can you give us some direction about what we can do this evening? Besides open the public hearing?
That's all you can do, because the record's going to remain open until the next hearing.
But we're still able to ask questions and things of that sort.
To the people who give testimony like you do normally, I
Right,
mean,
okay.
it's somewhat limited, but I don't believe the applicant is, well, we'll see. if the
Yeah, I
applicant
just
has
want to
any
make sure
concern.
that people in the audience have a clear understanding about what we're doing, since this has been continued a number of times, and what our abilities are to do whatever we can do.
Certainly. If there are folks here who'd like to testify, you certainly can take that testimony from them as you would under any other circumstance.
Okay. Do we have any people signed up to give testimony this evening?
We should see if the applicant has
Oh, that's
anything to say first.
They don't
Does the
have- they're not
applicant
here.
wish to speak?
Okay. That's fine.
Okay. So is there any public testimony?
Jenny Barksdale?
Judy. Okay, now you can come up and talk. The joys of doing things legally and correct means you had to wait 3 minutes. Sorry.
Okay. I live just behind the church, and I live there. My son is 24, about 24 years. So I know the history. So what is concerned me is the sewage. And I deal with the city. I went to the church that's called, I think it's 2011. The fence was really bad. We tiered. So we rebuilt the fence. Then we found all the back of the road is covered, and it's covered also. There's no drain holes. So there's a picture I took in the with Gary. Gary, I talked with him. This is bright sunshine. It's all the water. It's always have a puddle water. If you see, well, I own 1065 and 1067. We're just on the lowest, the Birchwood on the lowest. So I really concerned these things, and especially after the Washington, that's the total town. So you cannot see, but since I know there was some kind of a drainage, the same as the church front, and because people. One of the pastors tried to build blacktop the road. So he hired somebody dump some gravel. So the gravel covered the whole things. So in the year, so it's about 10 years. How I know? Because one day I was doing the garden, I smelled some bad smell. So we went over to see what's going on, and there was a pastor living on the trailer, and he was just visiting. So we told them, all you dump the dirty water will go direct to the fish, to the Willamette River. He said, sorry, I didn't know that. So he said, you should go find a place to dump the water in the proper way, something. So I knew it exactly what the building was before that. So in this situation, I was really concerned. One day my house will be run off the hill. That's happened. That's not just, I told Gary, I said, that's not just like my imagination some days. It's really happened. It's because there's no proper drainage. And when they first purchased this, move in this place, I went over, I asked them, I said, it's not just for me, also it's for you. I went to the third city hall, I got a blue print. One of the manager gave me the print. I even asked other churches to help them to locate the thing so they can just dig up. I said it's not just for me, and it's for everybody, even for you too. And there's no, all the rain, that's a building, pretty big building. All the rainwater directly come to the dirt, to the gravel. And I noticed this year they got a flood in their basement.
They built a what?
They got a flood in,
Oh, they had a
their
flood in the basement.
What I point is,
The picture that you have, we're not going to be able
no,
to
you
see
don't
that.
have to. I just want to make a point.
If
Yeah.
you want that to be part of the record, you'll need to submit a copy of that to the city staff.
You just email it, or
So-
maybe
I
John
did.
can.
I did.
Yeah, you
In
can
the
either
letter, yes,
email it or send a print.
Oh, okay. Yes. That was before the Washington. Right now, I was even more concerned, not just for me. I think because they were so tall, all this lower part, other duplex, other people, most people maybe not come to see because they're renters and they rented maybe not so like a homeowner, because I live here and I live here, that's a long time. I almost like a history for that part of the situation. So that was my concern. I even talked to the city and try to solve the problem. They say once they build, they become private. So it's like two private owners to solve the problem. So when they even want to expand, that's even after you approve, who I'm going to talk to, then become private. They're such a big with just a small home owner, and so I have to beg my son, my ex-spouse, to have some sandbag to lay on the lower part of my yard.
Well, I appreciate your testimony.
3 minutes ago, yes.
If you would like to submit something, a document to the city staff, then we can review that. That would be very helpful.
Okay, so
We would like to see the picture on your camera.
So if you
okay.
could submit that.
So that's what I'm not saying what's their situation. I'm not even sneaking. I talk to Gary, the public. I just say it's just my concern
Okay.
for you and for me, for everybody else. I don't want my house, everybody. So once you approve, just me and dealing with Gary, maybe tomorrow the Gary will go away. Somebody else will take charge. How I can deal with this question? So everything have to think
That's
ahead.
why we have Tony. He's always in charge.
Damon, you had a question?
I just, real quick,
Yeah.
you start out saying you had a concern about sewer, but
Yes.
what I hear from what you said, it's actually stormwater?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just-
Yes.
that's-
That was a storm drain. Somebody
Yeah.
dumped the sewer. That was illegal, and we
Right, yeah,
told.
that's a different
Yes,
thing.
that's different. It's-
Okay, I just wanted to
Yes.
make sure, because
Okay.
that's
Yes.
part of the same drainage system, but I wanted to make
Really?
sure, well, I mean, it's not the same pipe, but it's the same system of,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
gravity and
Yes.
where things go and where it gets pumped, but I just wanted to make sure it wasn't sewage, it was stormwater from rain that you were mostly concerned
Yes,
about. Okay.
I use second language.
Yeah, no, it's no problem
yes,
at all.
this-
That's-
because that's a big thing. All the rainwater,
Mm-hmm.
their gutter does not the gutter come to the line. The gutter is just split out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there other public testimony at this time?
There are no more comment cards at this time.
Okay.
You have one.
We have somebody in the back. Why don't you come on up?
You can after.
Just need to state your name, and then the rest they'll do on
Please
the card.
introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Brandon Boyd, and I live in Oregon City. And I just had a couple of questions regarding the continuance. I believe it's been over 60 days since the original continuance was issued. So I'm kind of wondering where we're at in the process, why a continuance is proposed, and if that's the decision before the commission, whether or not to grant that continuance.
Yeah.
So.
I think that one's Tony's.
The applicant is looking at, it's a very, serious issue in terms of the sanitary sewer, and it has pretty big impacts, not only on the city, but the applicant and the property owners in that area. Additional time is needed for engineering work to look at that, and then to have discussions with staff about alternatives, if there are any methodologies that are used to do the calculations for what the existing condition of sanitary sewer flow is and whether or not they'd be adding to it. There's also some question, there's a proposal to maybe consider consolidating another non-conforming use determination into this application, which would require renoticing, which they're considering at this moment, so they need additional time to work on all those things.
I guess I'm kind of wondering how much leeway is given to the applicant. Does it get stretched on another 3 months, 6 months, a year? Where's the cutoff, and where does the buck stop as far as the process goes?
Well, I think the simple answer to that is that had we been aware of the sewers question, the application probably never would have come forward until that issue was addressed. Since that kind of popped up in the middle of this process, then most of the onus is on the applicant to move the process forward. We have by law, we have a certain date, amount of days to act. Not a date, but it's 120 days, and then there's 100.
When does the 180-day time clock kick
120
in?
days.
120?
Well, there's
120.
180 that's statutorily required to process the entire application. So in other words, if the applicant doesn't give you any more information, there is a...
For
there's another
completeness,
time
so we've already deemed it
period.
complete.
Right.
So if your application is incomplete for 180 days, we kick it out.
Okay.
So
So
we've,
it's just a
Yeah, it's not-
completeness review
it's
phase.
120.
right.
All right.
So what could end up happening is it could get stretched out a couple more months, like another 42 in this case.
2 days.
Yeah, sorry, not months, days.
42 months.
Because and it's a matter of reasonableness. Is it reasonable for everybody to get their engineers together and figure this out, and is that a reasonable amount of time for that to happen? If the answer is yes, then continuances kind of keep happening. At a certain point, though, if we deem that they're just stretching things out, waiting for a new election cycle, or and I'm not saying this applicant, I'm just saying as in general, that they're waiting for some legal thing to occur in Salem that will change the rules or something like that, then we may say, these are the rules that are in place. You need to decide whether you're going to go forward with your application or not. Here's our vote.
Just-
We've had some experience with this, and I'll go ahead and let the attorney respond here.
Yeah, it's really going to be applicant driven. Applicants have a lot of rights under the framework, and there's been cases that have talked about this. So, as Tony explained, there are some very difficult questions out there, and as long as the applicant thinks that it's in their best interest to try to continue and resolve them, then the applicant will probably, move this along its track.
But the ultimate decision to continue or not is before the Planning Commission, is that correct?
Right. We kind of don't
Yes.
have a whole lot of options. I know you're probably feeling a little frustrated because this has been stretched out, and you kind of want something to happen, up or down, is what I suspect.
But the reality of it is yes, we could say no continuance, but then they'll appeal, and most likely the appeal will be upheld because they have a reasonable request. There's an engineering question. So.
Well, and this information that we're looking at for the justification for this continuance was not made available until the last hearing. So that's new information that was not available at the beginning. So it kind of changed the sequence of things.
Yeah, typically, it's 120 days, but in this case, because of the information that appeared, it's being stretched out. But it's because of a reasonable.
Just one final question. Are there any other cases or applicants that have come before you where the process has stretched out this long that you can recall?
Yeah, we had a couple of subdivisions that got continued over a period of 3 or 4 meetings. And I think the other thing, Tony, didn't we have
Don't have the zone changes.
when we had one of the hearings that a continuance was requested by somebody who wasn't able to be at the hearing? They had, so somebody in opposition.
It was the first evidentiary hearing.
yeah.
Anyone can request a
Request a hearing.
continuance
So
at the first
it got
evidentiary
continued because of those reasons, not just because of the applicant. These were other people who said, hey, we need more time, and that's reasonable.
Yeah.
So as long as it remains reasonable, the continuance continues.
Well, the system is designed on balance to protect the applicant, but also to protect the public. So it gives the public an opportunity to weigh in as new evidence becomes available. So it's designed to be a balanced approach.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay? Any other public testimony at this time?
My name's Donnie Selby.
Wait.
Come
Gotta be
up.
at the mic.
Yeah, you need to
We
introduce
don't want
yourself
Renee
at
to
the
come
mic.
over and kill us.
My name's Donnie Selby. I live in the neighborhood adjacent as well. We also have questions about the continued use of the property without a permit, since 2012. That's been an issue for all of us. It's a nuisance. We're tired of it. Why has it been allowed to
I think this
go on
go to Tony.
Yeah, that.
while we have to wait through this process?
I understand that. That's not necessarily our purview. That would be either code compliance or your group. So I'll let you answer that one too. You lucky devil.
I think I'd have to look into it to come back in terms of the long history that's been here. I think that there's a disagreement about whether they actually ever discontinued a use on that property or not. What uses are allowed under a religious institution.
Okay.
If we-
Complicated, and part of this process was to rectify and address those issues.
So,
Sorry to interrupt, but if we had an idea that this was going to come up, of course, we would have marked down the date that the church left, how long it stayed unused. We all know it was. It was empty. Nobody was there. There was no cars coming and going. Nobody was mowing the lawn. So in my mind, there's no question of it. The building stopped being used for a certain amount of time. I can't tell you exactly how long. So
I think I understand the frustration, but those facts are important, and that's what this process is set up to do, is to get all those facts out and allow the commission to make an informed decision about that, because there's going to be a disagreement about what the use was and the time frame of it, which is hard for, all we can do is work with the information that's provided to us and what we can put together to form a record that can be defended, either for or against. The facts are what they are, and that's what we try to wade through. I hate to say come back again, but but if there is things that you can do to put together what you recall or your neighbors recall, it's
Please.
important to put that into the record should that opportunity come up.
Yeah. If you have
it
additional-
would have been if I.
Yeah, if you have additional information, please feel free to submit it.
Absolutely.
It's there's two sides to every story.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay, thank you.
Donnie.
So
Donnie.
And I do apologize. We asked folks to come up. This is televised. It is also taped for the record, so that's why we do ask you to just come up to the microphones to speak. It's the only way we can get your testimony on the record.
That's somebody else.
And you will be on television.
It's not that thrilling.
I'm Sean Hauk, and I just moved in on Brookside yesterday. I was informed of this whole thing, and my back window looks out onto that church, into the activity that's going on, which is not remarkable. But the idea of a dormitory with 60 or 70 clients and all the activity that goes on with all the kids coming back, from school and that type of thing, and all the activity, which you guys have probably heard this before, is very concerning. It's not to say that anything tragic would ever happen, and that's not your purview here. I understand that as well. But I hope you all take this into consideration when you guys make this decision. Okay.
Thank you.
Sir? Thanks.
Are there any other people who would like to make a testimony this evening?
Or have questions?
Okay, seeing none, we'll close the testimony portion of the hearing this evening. So we have a request for continuance before us to June 9th. Do I have a motion on that? Yes, ma'am.
I don't want to make a motion. I just wanted to ask Tony, I have just kind of skimmed this, obviously not really read it, so we got it tonight. Is there going to be any discussion about this? What we've got here, and I know there's charts and arrows and calculations and fun stuff that I'm looking forward to reading.
I think it would be appropriate for you to take the information and read through it. I believe either John Lewis or Alida would be at the next hearing and available to answer questions associated with it, present that information. We wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to get that in the record. As we weren't sure what was going to happen when we put out the staff report.
Can we expect an actual presentation on that information so we don't have to decipher it all?
Would that be John? I assume we put together a presentation on
I was
that
just
info-
looking
On the
for
sewer
Cliff
master
Notes
plan
version.
itself, or
Well,
the...
Of course, that's one of
the
my favorite
applicability
topics.
of the applicability of this little packet of information we got to this particular case.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Alida can help me out here a little bit, but a couple things. I'd like to speak to the fact that there has been a delay. I mean, a lot of that's wrapped around the fact that we're trying to complete a citywide sewer master plan, and trying to deal with all those results that are preliminary. We don't even have a final version of our sewer master plan yet. We've got to move that plan along with not this development application, but several others, and that has turned out to be kind of a challenge because we want the sewer master plan to be as correct, and we want to have plenty of time to review that. That's a pretty lengthy process. We've been working on it for a while, but it's important that it be a product that we're happy with, because we got to live with that for 10 years or more. And so this, getting wrapped into this one, I guess, is part of the challenge that comes along with developing a master plan, especially when you find this location and other locations that have capacity problems. That creates some challenges, and we're going to see more of those, more of the fallout from those challenges as we move forward with adoption of the master plan, and really probably even before that, some kind of a program for how we deal with a sewer system that's under capacity. So I think that's probably frustrated the applicant as much as it's frustrating us. But I think if you want a presentation on what's before you, we were asked to provide a detailed memorandum which does explain the problem. It's not the sewer problem is not really that complex, in my opinion. But bottom line is we've got daily flows that come into a sewer system that are generated through the uses that are in the neighborhood. This particular neighborhood is basically built out with a few exceptions to that, but it's basically built out. And the difference is, or the challenge is, this sewer system, like all of our sewer systems, is highly impacted by leakage and inflow that comes into the sewer system. So when it rains or is the soil is oversaturated with stormwater and surface water, we see flow increases sometimes up to 8 times the base flow, and that's not unusual for sewer systems. So, and this is one of them. So the pipe is full. It's full so much that it fills the pipe and it fills it up beyond the elevation of the ground, and it sometimes spills out. So adding more flow to that system when we know we've got that problem. In fact, in this particular neighborhood, we've seen flooding of basements. And so to me, it seems pretty straightforward. I get the legal and the planning, but to me, it's our cup is full. And adding more flow to our cup is the wrong thing to do. And, had we not known about this problem, we might have come up with that, but a different solution. But now we know about it. And, we don't, in my opinion, we shouldn't be approving more flow in the cup until we fix the problem downstream.
John, do you anticipate any rebuttal testimony from the applicant in this regards? And so I'm just thinking, are we going to get any more technical information? Are we going to, the next time, when June 9th rolls around, are we going to have another pile of...
We weren't planning it.
Okay.
As far as I know,
we can't.
You're probably going to see the applicant's proposal on a methodology to justify or set a baseline, of which there'll be some information.
Is that in the packet tonight?
There's some information,
There's some
but this is a
information about
very
it.
evolving process
I saw some from
everyone's
KPFF.
trying to
I know we
get
can't
the-
make them do it, but can we encourage them to do it, to submit that information in a timely way so that we have a chance to digest it before the meeting? At least we have a few days to...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to end up in a situation, if they submit, if we submit information after the packet's gone out, you're going to have to make a decision on how we're going to process that information, because essentially you'd be seeing it for the first time at the night of the hearing. And so whether you move into some type of either continuing it or 777 or something like that.
That's inevitable, but, and I don't mind, just a little bits of information coming, later on, but, if it's something like this, I'm going to have a hard time being able to wade through that right before the meeting.
Well, I
We will
guess,
certainly request, I mean, obviously, we would need the information in order to even review it.
Yeah.
And provide you any type of response.
We don't want to put you guys into any 120-day problems or anything like that either, but,
We will avoid them.
right, okay.
We'll make sure of that
Okay,
from our standpoint.
yeah.
John
Let us know.
John and Alita, I guess part of where I'm coming from may be the same place that Paul's coming from, is that just like when we did the transportation master plan, I am not a transportation engineer, and as much as I love reading those traffic counts and things, I only understand it this much. Having gone through a sewer master plan once, I at least know what to look for, but I guess what I'm looking for is, are there anything in here that you particularly would recommend that we pay attention to? Because I know after I get to some of those tables, my eyes will glaze over because I won't really understand what this is saying. I mean, this is not something that I deal with every day, although I fully understand the importance of it, but I just glanced at it. So, I mean, am I looking at, are there parts of this you would recommend that we focus on? I just want some guidance on what I really need to pay attention to in this document that you gave us.
Commissioner McGriff, there are 3 documents. One is the sanitary sewer master plan, the latest version to date, and that is the supporting document for the technical memorandum by Brown and Caldwell. That would probably be a good detailed explanation of the Hazelwood area sanitary sewer problems. And then there is a memo from myself to John Lewis, and that is a summary memo giving a very brief background, the problem, and our conclusion regarding additional flow from the men's center. So I think if you read my memo first, that gives you a good summary. And if you want to go further into the details, the technical memorandum from Brown and Caldwell really does lay out the details of that area well, to know what the problems are.
And that's not a long document. I want to say that's about 10 pages, including the maps. The master plan is pretty lengthy, and I don't think it was the intent for you to necessarily go through that in detail. I think we wanted it in the record.
As a reference.
Bless you, John.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Bob?
Jennifer, I have a question about the continuance of this hearing. While they're still using that property illegally? Are they using it legally?
As Tony mentioned, that either code enforcement or non-conforming use determination, neither of those paths have been followed by the city. And he also mentioned that the applicant is considering requesting a non-conforming use determination. As and you can read about that in their submittals in this packet. So there are a couple of ways to go about that, but has code enforcement received any formal complaint?
Well, they're not sleeping over there or doing any of that stuff, so.
Yeah, we did receive a code enforcement inquiry about sleeping. I think we sent them a memo that sleeping at the facility is not allowed. So this process was to get to the root of what was allowed there and what wasn't, and so that's why we're going through this, is to make that determination.
You're referring to the memo from Jennifer
Mm-hmm.
to
And I
the
think
applicant.
that was entered a couple, maybe two
Yeah.
meetings ago,
Right.
I
Yes,
believe,
right.
when we were over at the Pioneer Center.
Yeah, as I recall, that was 2 meetings ago. Okay, any other questions from the commission?
What was the date we were talking about
June
again?
9th.
June 9th.
And why are we not going 2 weeks out?
Because they need that much more time for the engineering studies. And
We start running in. We got Memorial Day. We lose.
Right.
So then
Yeah.
you're into June,
Okay,
and we're not going to turn this around by the first meeting in May.
okay.
I move that we continue CU 1301, site plan design review, SP 1311, lot line adjustment, lot line abandonment, LL 1304 to June 9th, 2014.
Second.
Commissioner McGriff?
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Commissioner Mahoney? Chair Kidwell?
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Okay, see you all again on the 9th.
Okay.
Good night. Thanks.
Next item on our agenda for the evening is
Thank you, Jennifer.
PC 14-033, presentation, review proposed sign code. Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 15.28.
All right. Laura Turway with the Planning Department. I am here for our third work session on our proposed signed code. We've gone through, we put out a draft of our code dated March 10th, and this is the last time that we'll be addressing all of those items that are in that code. Can you hear me?
Oh, no.
No, he's
he
closing the door.
Yeah, you just pull it, it'll close.
They want to chat.
We want to answer all your questions regarding the March 10th draft, and then we expect draft number 2 to come out on May 12th. So I'll give you an overview of some of the differences for that one. At this point, the May 12th draft is being reviewed by our lawyers, so we don't have it for you now. Our intent is to take all of your comments and all the comments that we hear from the public and come out with the draft every so often, but we don't want to come out with the draft every time we see you because we want to be thoughtful about those comments that we do, make sure we don't create any new problems for ourselves. So it's one of the City Commission goals to review our sign code and see if it was still relevant. It was about 20 years old, and it addresses signs on private property. This is an overview of our current code. We wanted to create signage standards which are clear, fair, and supported. Our signage standards, again, have to be content neutral, so we can look at how many signs you can have, both in the right-of-way or on private property, how big those signs can be, what those materials are, and where they can be located, but we can't look at what the signs say. So I'm going to give you an overview of our code. Again, the draft is dated March 10th. It's on our website. We also have a project website, ocsigncode.org. I want to take all your comments, and then we will, again, adjust the code accordingly and come back to you on May 12th. So one of the items that we haven't talked about yet are public murals. We do want to allow murals. This is a picture of a painted wall sign. It probably meets our painted wall sign code, so it's just a reference of what we're talking about. But we have written code to allow murals that will be larger than a wall size. Those would have to go through a Oregon City Arts Commission through a Type 3 process at a public hearing. So with this proposed code, you'll see draft criteria, which we'll go over in just a minute. They'll have to put an easement over the art, and it would be donated to the city's art collection for a certain period of time.
Not in perpetuity?
I mean,
Well, you said for a certain period of time.
so
And I said not in perpetuity then.
So it would be a public access easement that would be conveyed, and the general standard would be for a 5-year timeline. And then after that 5-year timeline, they would have to come back for more approval. So we're trying to look at maintenance standards for these murals. So they'd have to be reapproved again. The Arts Commission could approve it for a different timeline than 5 years, but our code says a minimum of 5 years. So we want that, whatever that is, to stay for at least 5 years.
Stay in good repair.
Stay and be repaired. So they'll have to propose a plan of how they're going to maintain it over that 5-year period, and then they'll just have to check back and get another approval every 5 years, or unless the Arts Commission grants a longer period of
And we're
time.
creating some new organization.
So we have in our code an Arts Commission, but it doesn't meet
Exist.
currently. So if someone turns in, so we would like to recreate the Arts Commission. And if someone would like to turn in an application for a mural, then we really have to create the Arts Commission.
Okay, then why would it be a Type 3 process? They're not a land use organization of any sort.
It's just a public hearing process.
I see.
So some of the criteria for murals are, again, that we talked about, that it stay put for a certain amount of time. That's meant to discourage advertisements that change frequently. We look at the structures and that the scale is appropriate for the structure and the scale is appropriate for the neighborhood as well. It can't be placed over windows, vents, or doors. Our current code, draft March 10th, does allow for a variety of types of murals. So like if you wanted to do a mural out of tile or something like that. But one of the proposed changes in the May 12th would be that all murals are just paint. If murals are in historic districts, they would have to go before the Historic Review Board, the same as any other development. So subsequent to that, we're adopting 2 new policies for the Historic Review Board to figure out how to look at murals and what criteria they should use.
Would they go?
Go ahead.
Would they go to HRB before or after the Arts Commission?
They would need both of them approval, so they could do a condition on either. So it would be same as if you get HRB. You could approve it with a condition that they approve it, and they can do the same.
Seems to me you'd want to try to simplify that process and just have one. The one that's the most restrictive is the one it should go through, which would be Historic Review Board if it's in a historic district, instead of making somebody go through. Because I know when the one got approved over there, it just was one review with Historic Review Board, and it was pretty simple.
I'm not sure that actually complied with our code.
By going to the,
Size.
in terms of size?
The one on that wall is probably okay, because right now you get twice the length of the wall for total
Yeah,
wall
I'm
signage.
talking about the
There would have
one
been a
across the-
type.
Yeah, the one directly across the street.
Yeah.
There's some where we're concerned about the size relative to the wall.
Are we trying to address this, again, I'm not interested in, I'm trying to, make sure that we're not trying to fix something that ain't broken, as they say in the slang, but I know that there have been some issues with the mural on the wall at 10th in Main adjacent, this and that building is, that I don't know what's the building's called, but this and that business is in there. And that, unfortunately, that pure mural, which happens to be a really nice one, has suffered from some repair issues. And now and I think when it was repaired the last time, everybody was saying, why did they let them paint it on a piece of plywood? Because plywood does not hold up in Oregon any way, shape, size, or form, and it's a shame that my understanding is it's gonna have to go away.
I believe they have a grant from Metro to fix all of that.
And
That particular one.
that kind of leads back to the question I was going to ask you. Did I hear you say that this was going to be limited to painted murals?
In the new draft code, it will be.
Why is that?
Part of the reason is if it has a certain duration of time for 5 years or something like that, that you're not chipping away what's left on the building once the, say, tile is removed. Also, there is criteria that it's not a reproducible mural. So sometimes, like in downtown Portland, you'll see something that's basically a printed sticker that's stuck on for advertisement.
Like
so we're trying to avoid that.
That whole side of the building just changes every month because it's really just a giant billboard.
Yeah, it's kind of a stickerish, so it was easier in the code to have it painted, and it sense that that's where we wanted anyway.
I guess I'm kind of looking at it from the other direction. I'd like to maybe allow for something more durable than just paint. I've seen some nice artwork in metal, tile, glass. I mean, there's other materials that you can use in a mural, and if you put the onus on whoever's responsible for the mural to maintain it, it may be easier to maintain something that's well built from the outset than something that's done cheaply because they think it's only going to last for 5 years.
We can take that out. I mean, that's one of the proposed changes for the next draft. So if you would prefer to allow a variety of materials, we can.
I guess what I'm aiming for is something that doesn't end up with the problem that Denise is talking about, where you put a mural up that's designed to fail from the beginning. It would be nice if it was designed with the expectation that it could last, essentially your expectation was that you could continue to maintain it indefinitely.
So we think that we solved the maintenance part by making them come back every so often and to reapply. So if it wasn't in a good condition, the Arts Commission wouldn't grant.
Is that what they do in Centralia and some of the other communities that have, that really promote their murals?
We have looked at a lot of code, as you probably saw all those attachments online, and some people do things in a variety of ways. We had suggestions like at City of Silverton and some other places like that. The process varies, but legally, the process that we should be doing is something similar to, I think this is based off Milwaukee or Portland or a combination of both, to doing the easement so it gets dedicated to the city art fund and for that period of time, and then periodically coming back and checking up on it. So they're starting over, and if they don't have approval within 30 days of the expiration date, it has to come down. So that's where the paint kind of came in, because it was easier to change if needed.
First, I think because this is we're requiring them to go through Arts Commission, I think the materials restriction doesn't necessarily need to be there. The assumption is the commission would be intelligent enough to say weird plastic blocks don't work, or hey, there's this new material out there that does work. Or if somebody comes with an innovative metal design, I think they should have that ability. So if it was just nothing personal, if it was just a staff review, you guys have enough on your plate, and so I think I'm okay with that. The other thing is, I think rather than having the issue bouncing between the Arts Commission and the Historic Review Board, it should probably just say Arts Commission, and upon approval in a historic area will then go to the Historic Review Board. Because for one thing, it's clarity. It's this, then this, not whichever one happens to be coming up first. I don't know of any of these that would be time sensitive. And then secondly, it gives the Historic Review Board some assurance that artists have looked at this, believe it's a valid thing to do, and then it just becomes a question of, does it meet the historic, criteria?
I guess if I had my...
You'd rather do it the other way around?
Well, just because it'd be consistent with the way we do everything else.
That's what I was saying.
We send it to HRB, and then they deal with the historic context of it, and then we go
Exactly.
through site plan to deal with transportation,
Exactly.
engineering.
Yeah.
And they can, you hate to have a building design, and then HRB say,
Goes,
we'd
"Hey,
like
yeah."
these windows, and just for a
Yeah.
consistency
Yeah.
standpoint, not that it's not that big of a deal, but it'd be consistent if we went the other way.
But,
If you're-
hypothetically, that would only apply in the historic district.
Correct.
Outside of the
Correct.
historic district, it would just be the Art Commission.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I hear your point, but I think the flip side of it is, from at least my thought is, HRB should be just looking at the piece of art as, does it meet our historic criteria? And, is it consistent with our criteria? Not necessarily, is it a good piece of art, or is it, appropriately designed? That answer would come to them via the Art Commission already. So, I don't have I'm not going to be on the Art Commission, probably won't be on HRB, so I don't see any of these. But because HRB is a quasi-judicial and it has some more power, the question then becomes, well, if they say no and somebody appeals it, does it go to the Art Commission or does it go to the Planning Commission?
Because you'd be in a quasi-judicial.
Right. So I think because that's the highest level of power, that they should be the last review, because the next appeal would be to City Commission.
Yeah.
So
Well, the other thing,
because City Commission will go, what's going on? What the Art Commission say?
as I hear Damon talking about it, it seems to me that there actually should be two different reviews happening. If the HRB is looking at it, they should be looking at it strictly from the relationship to the historic aspect of where it's going to be located. The Art Commission ought to be looking at the sign without regard for the historic aspect, but looking at it from, is the sign a quality design? Are the materials appropriate? Do they meet the criteria of a sign that is hopefully going to last longer than 5 years? And when I talk about materials, I'm thinking, there's etched glass. There's you think about some of the paintings in Europe that are on fresco kind of paintings that have lasted for hundreds of years. They're obviously maintained over time, but it is feasible with and especially with more modern materials available to have if it's a quality design, to last for 20 or 30 years. I did have a question. Damon was talking about other jurisdictions. Have you talked to the Dalles about their murals? I know they've got a lot of murals in the city of the Dalles.
I don't think so, but I can.
If you drive through downtown city of Dalles, there's probably at least a dozen murals.
Same with Springfield. The other part of my question, or the other question I have is, it's approved, it's put up on the wall, 2 years down the road, somebody comes by and tags it, or chips a tile off, or whatever. Whose responsibility is it to fix it, since it's now a public easement, public right-of-way issue?
So one of the criteria is that the applicant is responsible. Even though it isn't a public easement, the public doesn't maintain it.
Okay.
And then, so they'll have to also explain what materials they're using and how they're
Yeah, that's
proposing a
fine. It's
plan
just-
for maintenance
the-
and
The answer is
anti-vandalism.
it's still the person who put the mural up, or the property owner.
Yeah.
Does the mural,
Still the underlying property owner.
does the mural become the property of the city?
It
When
has
it goes
an
up?
easement, so
All
the
right.
easement says
So
that there's,
if the city wants to change the mural or move it or something like that, there wouldn't be any control of the original artist that produced the mural?
every time it's changed, it has to come back for another approval. So we
Okay.
wanted to make sure that they didn't get just a box and they could change out that box whenever they wanted to. So every time it's changed at all, it has to go back for more approval.
Yeah, because I've heard of scenarios where the artist will have control over that, and the
Mhm.
city won't be able to do anything with the mural at all, and you end up with this impasse
Yeah.
with a,
Well,
and I
and-
think
and-
there's actually a state law.
But I think she's saying that you have to come back every 5 years to renew the approval. So after 5 years, the city could.
I guess I'm not quite understanding your concern. The city would like to remove it or move it?
Well, I mean, if the city would like to do anything with it, they would have to get permission from the artist.
Not if there's an
Versus-
easement on it.
Well, that's,
Yeah,
I guess
Yeah.
we'd
it
have
sounds
look
to
at-
me like what we're talking about is basically a revocable permit
Permit.
for
Yeah.
5 years. And after 5 years, if it doesn't meet the criteria of the city, it could be required to be removed.
Right. So if it, so during that 5 years, the city has an easement on the building. So we do have some control over it. The applicant maintains it. If the artist wants to change that image at all, it has to go back for another approval, even though it's got time left on its current approval.
But what you're saying is what does the
City.
easement, what grants does the easement give the city in terms of using the mural itself?
Let's say there's a mural on some building that's going to be redeveloped, and they got to move it somewhere, and it's not done with the approval, and
The artist.
yeah.
Well, once
I'll look into that.
That's
Okay,
it.
I'll send you what I know about it.
Okay.
Question?
I'm the same.
Do we have a definition of what determines a mural?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, so also regarding the process for approval, it's described in much more detail in the next version that you'll get on May 12th. So it'll have those tracks and a little bit of process more. So, prohibited signs, it's very similar to our prohibited sign section now, but we added some things that are now prohibited. Those little flaggy things you see the picture of are actually allowed now, so that would become a prohibited sign type.
Thank you.
Also, we've heard a lot of comments from the public regarding those. Air-blown signs, they're not allowed now, but we're more specific about that sign type. So there are a variety of sign types that we added. We took out some sign types that were unenforceable because they maybe weren't content neutral. We currently, in our current code, we allow signs up to 4 square feet on undeveloped lots. We increased it to 6 to stay consistent with some of our other changes that we made. Sort of 6 is the new 4.
Because,
For temporary signs.
so you're
it's-
talking about if somebody has their sign for sale or, I mean,
Uh-huh. So that was recommendations from a few bodies, but it would encompass the sign for an A-frame sign is more 6 than 4. Some of the comments from real estate community was 6 is more reasonable than 4 because they'll have the thing and then the little topper or
well,
something like
and
that.
as somebody driving by, I don't want to have to squint to try to figure out what the sign is. 6 gives me the information and I can stay focused.
you're
So-
supposed to be keeping your eye on the road, not staring at A-frame signs while
Well,
you're driving.
that's why they're out there.
You're
so-
stopped at the red light.
If you're stopped at a red light, then you should be able to read it.
That's while I'm drinking and steering with my knees, and shaving and applying makeup.
Eating soup and
Yeah.
So the whole list of prohibited sign types are listed in the code.
Go
you-
back,
go
yeah.
back.
Yes.
I'm just trying to imagine what a 6
You see the
square
plywood?
foot A-frame sign would look like.
No,
A 2 by 3.
6 square feet is 2 feet by 3 feet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
3 foot wide by 3 foot tall.
All right, okay.
Now, does that mean 2 feet
I'm sorry, yeah.
by 3 feet on each
Yeah,
side?
per face.
So we have
Per
a
sign
height
face.
and a width requirement as well.
Per sign face. So you've got an A-frame, it's 2 feet by 3 feet on one side and 2 feet by 3 feet on the other side.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're talking about these on vacant lots, it's one sign face?
Sign face.
No, I'm asking, can they, if they're gonna have a sign, are we talking about a double-sided sign, or are we talking about one sign face that faces
That's a good question.
the street?
So it's actually much more technical in the code language. It says 6 square feet per sign face, up to 12 square feet. So the 3 sides, so the total is 12, however you cut it, if you put multiple sign faces or not.
You're maxed
So
out
your
at
max
6
is the
square
same.
foot on one face, but 12 total, regardless of how many sign faces you have.
If you have 2 sign faces, it's 6 per face, because the total is 12. If you have 3, then it's 4 square feet
So
per face.
we've got a hand raised back here. Do you want to come up and?
Well, go ahead and come on up. While he's coming up, I just want to ask, do you have a definition of abandoned signs?
You have a definition of abandoned signs,
That's
and
all
it's
I want.
content neutral.
That's, I just want to make sure, because when you say abandoned sign, it's like, well, I know there's some signs.
It's a structure where no sign has been in place for a continuous period of at least 6 months.
You know,
So there's no sign face.
Right, there might be a square, but nothing in the, just bulb showing or whatever.
Okay.
You could end up with just a white.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Is that abandoned then?
No, because it has a white face, so it's,
So it's flipped over, but I can still read what's underneath? Backwards, upside down?
Content neutral.
Why don't we just say if whatever's not there anymore and they're not there, then it just needs to go away?
Can you tell if the sign's appropriate to the business without reading the sign?
I just want to know.
That's what we struggled with, and we struggled with that all
Well,
through the cat.
I guess, it gets back to the point to where we're talking about allowing signs on somebody's property where that particular business isn't even there, and it's just giving me, it's making me verklempt, that's all I'm just telling you. I don't want to see people's signs on other people's property proliferating all over town.
well, I'm sorry, but Burma Shave set that example decades ago, so.
Since when have you seen a Burma Shave sign? You weren't even alive when they were around.
Actually, in Wyoming, they still have them.
This ain't Wyoming.
Well, anyway.
Identify yourself, please.
Yes, Jonathan Stone. I just wanted to clarify so there was a question about the size of the A-frame. What is the 6 square foot? So the plastic, the sort of larger size plastic signs that you buy, just sort of interchangeable faces for, those are 6 square feet as far as I can tell. And so that's how you guys designed it. But I'm not sure if this is an unintended or an intended consequence. For instance, the sign that This and That has, made out of recycled doors and whatnot, I'm going to guess that would no longer be legal. So
I'd rather have that
Is it
than
the
one of those
size?
cheesy plastic ones.
That's for the Art Commission, not us.
So we didn't regulate the material of signs on private property. Public right-of-way, we also, we talked about this before, are allowing A-frames, and there is more stringent standards for A-frames in the right-of-way, such as This and That. There are material standards, but we do allow the plastic type as well as wood, metal, as long as they meet the dimensions. So if they don't meet the dimensions,
I think it probably meets it. I mean, it's very small.
This and That one?
Yeah.
I'm going to measure it tomorrow.
I mean, I know this is subjective, but to me that is much more tasteful and small than those big giant plastic ones that you see always blowing over and falling over in the street wherever they're going.
If the commission would like, you can remove plastic.
Huh?
If the commission would like, you can remove plastic.
No.
I just wanted to
They
clarify.
just cost an arm and a leg. I feel bad for businesses that buy them because they really are expensive, but.
No, I just want to see you add on here under prohibited signs, ugly signs.
Do we have to start over?
I'll second that.
Well, we can say that they should be compatible with signs of good design in the neighborhood, can we?
with
I
what
don't know how you get away with a compatibility finding of a type 1 over the counter.
We rely on
permit.
it heavily.
I know. You guys are.
Well,
That's
in my neighborhood,
primarily
there's a
what it is.
compatibility issue.
Yeah,
So
It goes, there's a public comment period.
yeah.
I mean,
There's- There's a lot of arm twisting.
I
that
like
goes on.
I like the criteria in the McLaughlin Conservation District, because that means we're not gonna get schlock.
Sure, I want to run every
Let's put
sign
that-
through a land use approval.
I mean, you'll know it when you see it, so I mean,
Just like art.
Yeah, I can
Hey, Laura?
recognize ugly when I
How
see
about-
it.
I think this came up at the TAC meeting. I can't remember, but the discussion of the little green men, is that?
you mean the little green turtle people?
Turtle, yeah.
They're not, they're not discussed specifically in our sign code.
So they wouldn't be prohibited. There's nothing here that would prohibit them from, or having to get approval for them.
So, it's, the little
Yeah,
kids.
we know who you're
little
talking
Yeah,
kids.
I've seen them. They have 'em at, they used to have them at St. John's. They probably still do. I've seen
They're all
them.
over.
Turtle.
They're all over. The turtle
We
people.
exempted signs
Yeah.
that are a part of a approved traffic control plan, say with like a site plan design review for like a school or something like that.
Yeah, I don't
So
think
if
those
they're
are-
part of a traffic engineer's plans. And then
I doubt they are.
I doubt, maybe this is incentive that they should be. And then we also exempted signs, government signs in the right of way and signs in the right of way for traffic control, and we defer to a couple of technical traffic control documents or standards.
What was the position of TAC? Was there a concern about folks putting
Well-
these out to try and slow cars down?
They don't do anything.
My recollection is we don't regulate them now. People think that they're generally okay. I mean, I think we kind of were thinking they were more like a traffic cone as opposed to a sign. So I just want to make sure that there's nothing. I don't necessarily advocate for them, but I think there's a place for them. And
Sign code currently is, I guess, quiet or doesn't list them as permitted or prohibited.
And that way they're prohibited.
The proposed code also doesn't list them as permitted or prohibited.
I think if they're not in the ITE manual, they're not allowed.
well, that's been the problem with them is they're not, but yet they're a recognized symbol of caution.
Schools.
You see them at schools. You see them in neighborhoods.
Yeah,
you
to
see
be
them-
honest with you, I know why people put them out, but they're really, they're really not effective. I mean, I think having a crossing guard is a lot more effective, so that when you see the person with the flag, you know what you're supposed to be doing. The little turtle thing doesn't,
Well, most of the time I see them it's just on neighborhood streets
Yes.
where they're reminding you that there's kids around, which is fine as far as I'm concerned.
if someone interprets it that
I think
way.
the school district's the biggest user of them, and I think they're effective, but
They could put it in their traffic control plan somehow, and then there is an avenue for school districts.
And since they already are hitting the kids standing out there with the signs. With
Are
the
they
flag.
hitting the kids?
Yeah, Glenn King got hit 2 years ago. So, and when I was at Eastham, one of the kids got hit. So I'd rather have them run over a turtle than a. So.
I have to say, I've been here 10 and a half years, and I've never seen a sign complaint on those.
Yeah.
But
I'll file one tomorrow.
so variances, we had some variance criteria in our code specific to the sign code, and we deleted it and just replaced it with the variance criteria from the variance chapter of our code. So all of these standards will look familiar to you. Also, we explained the variance procedure in a bit more detail as well. So we already know variances for signs require approval by you.
So how did the sign that's downtown on somebody else's property get approved? Did that go through a variance? Without saying the name? It's a specific restaurant downtown.
Yeah, because we're content neutral, and that you get one freestanding sign per frontage. So it doesn't have to be. There's
Well, under our
no.
existing code, I don't believe it allowed signs, off-premise signs on somebody else's property.
We don't have an off-premise, on-premise, because we're content neutral.
Under the current code?
So you get one freestanding sign, whatever. There's a couple in that same block area, or a block apart, that are for different businesses, and as long as it meets our standard placement, we're fine.
What constitutes a hardship? Is there a definition of it?
Did we take out hardship criteria? Oh, there is no definition for hardship criteria.
What do you think there should be?
That's why there's variance criteria. You've probably done 100 variances over your career, I'm sure.
So the criteria that it's the minimum that would alleviate the hardship.
Most of the time, on variances, as you know, Bob, it's a self-created problem.
Yeah.
And that's why they usually aren't approved, because they've created the problem themselves.
Cities usually create maxims for looking at hardship criteria. So in other words, there's like certain factors that people consider when they're dealing with hardship, and then they can go through that little analysis, and if they meet it, then they're good.
We can take a look at that, and then also if we change this code, we'll take a look at, not with the sign code, but later when we look at our other code, variance criteria as well. So we want to make sure that we keep them consistent.
Real quick.
Yep.
Since this code is referencing the variance chapter, and I don't have it directly in front of me, but I would make sure that in this you say something that says, if OMC 1760 is updated, that update shall apply. So you don't necessarily have to go through, you update 1760, and then you have to apply, come in and say, and we updated the sign code, and we updated the traffic. So just a little sentence that says, OMC 1760 will dominate or whatever if there's a
Take priority.
Yeah.
You can take out the criteria itself and just say the criteria is found in 1760.
No, well, I like it that it's there because I hate going, oh, now I got to pull this book or I got to upload this page or what. It's fine that it's there. Just I think a simple sentence that said, if there's a conflict between OMC 1760, 1760 shall supersede or something, yeah, I'm sure you've dealt with language like that.
Whatever the most restrictive is the one.
Yeah, so that way there's no, well, I can do it as a sign, but I can't do it as a building.
Makes sense.
Back when we used to have a book.
Yeah.
There's one over there.
I know. I had a subscription to it, so I'd get all my updates and everything. It was great. I loved it.
Okay, so that is completing the summary of all of our draft code. Are there any questions about or any more comments about anything in any of this draft code? Again, we've revised it. We'll come out with another version May 12th.
I had a question that popped up, one of those weird things at 2 a.m. kind of. And it goes to the electric billboards. At this point, we're proposing just 1 or 2 in specific locations.
No, so we currently have a policy. So we have a code that says no rotating, revolving, flashing signs. And we have a policy that says if you have an electric sign or something like that, you can't change it more than once a day. And so in the draft code, we just put it in our code. So your image can't change more than once a day.
There's your gas station where you've got your gas prices LED lit, you can change your gas price once a day, but you're not going to be in a situation where you end up with constantly changing reader board.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that was then that.
So
actually,
the Gladstone sign is not currently acceptable under our proposed.
Changing
the large
okay.
one on 205.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Okay, because my concern was under some of the earlier discussions that we were going to permit that, and then I realized that if we restrict how many, and that we might create a monopoly situation where it's essentially a franchise, and this is the only group that can do it because they've got the only 2 permits and they've already built. So, but if that's not happening, then I'm okay with that.
There is a request for it to be considered that was submitted in writing to both the Planning Commission and the City Commission.
Okay.
That's something certainly you guys can discuss if you'd like, or you can push forward the recommendation.
Is it still off the table?
Well,
So-
it's still here.
Unless you tell me it's back on.
No,
It's not in this code.
We're saying that we're not having them.
We're
Correct.
continuing
Okay,
our
fine.
current.
So
Perfect. I will fight to the death for
with
that.
this code,
I
in
will
order
fall on my
to,
horse sword for that one.
if somebody wanted to propose that, it would be a variance.
I don't know if you can't
get
do a
variance
variance
to
from a
something that
prohibited
isn't
use.
allowed
It's
in the code.
prohibited.
Right. You
Okay.
can't get a variance to something that isn't allowed.
If it's prohibited, you
Right.
can't. Okay.
So we went through the community advisory team, and they made many recommendations. Some things were split decisions. Allowing billboards was a split decision, and allowing electronic message centers was also a split decision, or how long those messages should be on the board before they change. And in those cases where we had split decisions, we just deferred back to our current code, or in this case, policy. And it's all noted on the footnotes of the code, so you can kind of tell where we deferred back to our current code.
I put a happy face next to mine.
I think it's a good code.
Tony, so what you're saying is a variance is only applicable to dimensions and placement of the sign and not to the type.
Correct. Yeah, you're talking
Number.
location, height,
Material number.
material, yeah, but not, we can't create a variance to a prohibited part of our code.
So for Charles's next birthday, if we want to get one of those air-blown signs to have on his property that says, "Happy birthday, Charles," we will not be allowed to do that.
That's right.
As much as we would love
You
to
can
do
put it in
that.
his backyard.
Just one?
If
Well,
it's not
yes,
visible
that's
from the
right,
right
Zach,
of
that's
way.
right. We're going to have more than one.
I think a pink gorilla would be nice.
You know, there are gifts that I just would never really appreciate, and that's one of them.
One of them? Okay.
Question under flags larger than a square foot per lineal foot.
Yes.
How is that appears to allow those tall attention-y flags?
So we have a definition of the attention flags, and it's based on a ratio of one, that it's 3 times taller than it is wider. So,
But if I have a 20-foot tall flagpole, this says that I can have a 20-foot flag, but it doesn't define what a flag is. I mean,
know I solved that problem, and I'm just a little.
We talked about that when you weren't here.
because I'm just saying, like, for instance, the national flag of Nepal is a tall, narrow flag. It's not the standard triangle or rectangle that people have. So, so I'm just.
Well,
Thanks.
so
Yeah. But I'm just saying.
We prohibit attention flags
I could
where
just slap them here.
the definition of an attention flag, also known as flutter,
Flutter flag.
feather,
flutter.
teardrop, or blade, means a pole-supported sign made of fabric, vinyl, or other similar non-rigid, where one side of the sign is more than 3 times as long as any other side.
Yep.
Those are not allowed.
Hopefully the Nepalese flag isn't more than 1 by 3.
It may be.
It is actually more than 1 by 3.
I don't know if this is out of turn, but have you guys done anything to reduce the size of the cornice signs above businesses? I think I was driving down Beaver Creek and I was looking at some of those signs and they're huge.
We reduced the wall signage by half.
You used to get 2 square feet for each linear foot, and now
That's-
you get 1
Okay.
square foot for each linear foot.
That's
And it's also measured by
terrific.
tenant space rather than before
Yeah.
it wasn't tenant, so one tenant could take up all of the building if it was multi-tenant.
And then anything to encourage channel letters or signs of good artistic design other than just the can signs with the vinyl stuff on it. Can't do anything with that.
Not in our code. We put
Yeah.
together a memo to address some other things like
know they're
how to
more expensive
encourage
and
good
all, but-
design.
Yeah.
If the
about
city
that.
commission wants to do grants for certain types or come out with a model sign, and if you meet that model sign, you get maybe a fee reduction or.
Or we codified.
Yeah.
That's all you could have.
Yeah, so we put out options in there. The planning commission had requested options on how to have quality
seen that
signs. It's really more of this, how the city commission wants to encourage that to happen and the funding
All right.
associated with that.
What are we doing with the skywriting?
Skywriting.
Ooh, that's a good
Just
one.
waiting for the breeze to take it to Glasgow.
Well, and
Does not.
that would go with
By the
like
way, for
flags.
the record, I have a picture of the flag of Nepal on my phone here.
Oh,
Yeah.
very nice.
Because I had no idea what it looked like.
That's why you have historians and on.
that's.
And if we're going to deal with skywriting, then that would also have to be the towed flags behind the planes.
Yes.
Right.
You know,
I guess
they're
this
not allowed
doesn't apply to
fly.
skywriting because this only applies to signs in the right of way and on private
Not
property.
signs in the cloud, not.
But I think, Commissioner Russell, getting back to your question, I think, that's certainly a discussion
Oh, it
as
says
to
it's
if you
social.
wanted
What
to
is that?
get into a situation where we restricted the type of sign that could be, to be more prescriptive.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking about new commercial buildings, if we ever have the opportunity to get new commercial buildings, if there's a way of creating a sign program that limits the types of signs they can put up instead of, because I've seen, I mean, it's killed me. The architect really goes all out to make a really nice design building. And then there's this sign that goes up there that is just horrible. And it ruins the whole.
Instead of like
design
nice
of the
brass letters that say Meyer and Frank building.
That's why I said ugly signs need to be
Right?
prohibited.
Well, yeah.
We can be more.
But see, that's what happens is that you go to redevelopment, you build
It
your
should be part of
buildings,
site plan and design.
and then
review
you're
up
all
front.
done. Everything's all said and done, and then a sign person comes in and says, "Okay," yeah, and they're representing somebody entirely third party. They're saying, "I want to do this sign, and you can't make me not do it, and I'm going to do it." And so there's this sign up there that.
Yeah, it's like
Is
the
that-
presentation we had that said people think about the signs last
Yes, they
after
do.
they've spent all their money on everything
Right.
else.
Yeah.
It gets right back to the issue that I brought up the other day, is that we're trying to regulate aesthetics through dimension. Can't do it.
Yeah.
Gotta do it by design, and we don't have the tools to,
Style.
style.
Yeah.
Well, again, maybe they submit their tentative sign plan with their site plan and design review so it can get reviewed. It's the issue we dealt with was why did they should submit their HVAC when they submit their site plan and design review so that we don't get it done after the fact and find we have these ugly things on top of buildings that we didn't anticipate.
And their
Which
landscape
we,
plan.
which we addressed through site
Right,
plan and design
right.
review.
Yeah, the
The
landscape
site,
plan
the
is
site
part of
plan
that. So
review give you the necessary tools to regulate a sign.
We would need to amend it.
You have to be content neutral anyway, so you
It's
find
hard.
yourself.
But
in
it
the
could be
same-
content neutral. I mean, if it was part of a
You look
new.
at proportions, I guess.
well, and materials.
Yeah.
You know,
You could
you're
you could
building
limit
a
it to say
Roman
channel letter
colonnade,
signs.
you
That's
could-
what I mean, is that you could be more restrictive
You know,
there in
yeah,
terms of.
those
but
kind of things. Or you
There
could
would
say
certainly be a change from
no
what we have
can
now.
signs or.
Or those
I think there's ways.
bubble ones that
Right,
they don't
the
allow those
clamshell
downtown anymore
signs,
either.
Like,
Now you're getting right
Yeah.
to the heart of
Yeah.
of this issue, and Paul brings up a good point. You're, an excellent point. I mean, this is right down to the heart of the matter, is controlling what a sign looks like through the design of it.
What's the point of signs, so?
And I think you
Signs
can, if you have a site plan review, do some modification to a sign design through dimensions, you know.
They can have a drugstore.
Is it square or is it oval?
yeah. The monument signs too.
Yeah, and that's not to say every sign is going to be ugly, but you're just assuring the fact that the city has got the right and the tools to control those ugly signs.
So you were thinking part of site plan design review for new buildings or across the board?
Across the board.
Across the board, yeah.
So essentially then across the board you'd be into some type of a limited land use decision.
Type 1.
I'm sorry?
Type 1.
I don't know how you can make,
Yeah,
I don't know how you can make such a subjective
Yeah, yeah.
determination with, I mean, unless you're going to say it has to be channel lettering and, it has to be very prescriptive for me to do a type 1 land use decision.
Yeah.
It has to be, is the fence 6 feet high or is it 7 feet high? If it's 7 feet high, I deny it.
I think, as a classic example, I am hoping that we are going to have, and we talked about this, some very specific sign regulations, fence regulations, landscaping regulations for the Willamette Falls Legacy site. Because we have, I think all of us in our minds, not maybe the same idea, but we have an idea that we want it to have a certain look and feel. And so I think having very prescriptive, you can have this type
Well-
of sign or
Well, remember in that one, we went to more of a
Right.
design review
Right.
board.
Right.
So
And-
we got out of the clear and objective
Right.
and needing to write these very prescriptive dimensional requirements. Or
If you remember, I think at our first workshop where we talked about this, one of the things that I talked about was that the only way you're going to have any influence on the subjective aspect of whether something is a good-looking sign or an ugly sign is with a design review. Because the problem is you cannot have a prescriptive description that eliminates bad design. So I can tell you that the shape of the sign, the size of the sign, the materials that can be used in that sign, the dimensions, everything about that sign, and it can still come out really, really ugly. So it's not a matter of how big, how small, what it's made out of that makes the sign look good. It's a subjective thing. And I would venture to say that every one of us, if we had an array of signs to look at, and you ranked them by the way they looked, just strictly your judgment of which sign you thought was the best looking sign, we would probably rank those signs in very, very similar order. And you might not be able to even put your finger on why you thought that was the best looking sign. But you go, wow, that's got some character. And that one over there is really tacky. And then you're going to find probably about 30 or 40% are kind of in the middle where, well, they're okay. But you'll get the really cool looking signs that you're going, wow, why doesn't everybody design a sign like that? And then the other ones that you think ought to be thrown in the trash can before they're ever installed on the building. And that,
Thank you, Alita.
I can only see that happening if you have a design review process with a design review committee, which we already kind of threw that out the window.
And frankly, good and ugly and pretty are subjective.
Yeah.
And depending upon what the business is, I mean, if a tattoo parlor wants to have a three-dimensional, skull as their sign, that's appropriate for the business. And, we may not like it right next to, the nursery, but, some people would be offended by it and some people would rally to support it. So I think, short of an art commission review, it's just not worth getting into that fight. And we just...
And that's exactly the same discussion we had 2 months ago when we first started this discussion.
And so we worked on incentives for the city commission to look at how to incentivize more attractive signs beyond our standards, or what are avenues that other jurisdictions have done, what options are out there for carrots for good sign.
Well, I think you can do that in urban renewal district too. If you can really leverage the design and do a little more arm twisting to get better signs out of folks.
Well, the other side of it, though, too, is a developer isn't going to come in. I mean, it's the rare developer, I guess I should say, that comes in and does something that is counterintuitive to the neighborhood they're building in. I mean, we've got a look on Main Street that we've developed. Somebody isn't going to come in and say, that lot on 12th, I want to build a 7-story solid glass faced, structure, because there's nothing like that there. It's not what the look is. And so he's going to end up, being a sore thumb, or he might think, the rare one would think, oh, it's unique and it'll attract people. So, I think there's a certain level of normalization that just happens because a developer wants to be successful.
I think, unfortunately, you can drive through every community and you drive past that building and it was like, what happened there?
Oh, yeah. But it's the exception.
It is.
And,
I agree.
And
it is the exception.
It either thrives because it's a good exception, or it fails because it's a bad exception. And developers will quickly adjust to that market.
I don't know if Jonathan remembers it, but when we were in Albany, I just pulled it up on my phone here if I can find it. They had a very interesting way to deal with, you didn't see any all A-frames, but they had...
Oh, yeah.
The little...
I thought those were weird.
I thought they were very effective, and I saw them.
It's a post. It's like a freestanding sign with a post. We investigated that. Public Works doesn't like it because it's actually in the ground. Because it's in the sidewalk.
But anyway, this was their downtown, and not everybody had them. And I was watching one of the merchants because we were there early, and they were putting it out. And then when I went back at the end of the day, they took it back in.
The banner.
Yeah, and everybody had a very similar design. It was, you know, so, but you could, I noticed it. And I thought, I'm going to take a picture of it.
Well-
Because I'd rather have, I mean, I think having A-frames every 5 feet is, I just don't think that works. After a while, you're just not going to see them.
So is there, I guess, on that question,
What? You're
where
trying to get
is
us to move along?
No, I just, it really does.
He does.
I'm just, because it seems to be the thing that pops up quite a bit. I mean, where is the commission at on A-frames?
One per face is, I can see a lot of very legitimate uses for an A-frame. And so I don't see that there's any real way to supplement or to have the same value use with some other sign form. I mean, the happy hour sign in front of a restaurant is a limited time. I mean, what needs to happen is they need to know for those 3 hours, it's out, then it's gone. The open sign, I mean, there's a place I use. It's set way back from the street. And I either need to almost come to a complete halt to look to see if they're open, or I need to look at the A-frame that's out that says they're open, so I know to pull into the driveway and not impede the flow of traffic. Granted, one of the things they could do is there is a pole that's on an abandoned sign, a flipped over sign, and they could maybe pay an electrician to add a sign to that, whatever. But the real estate open house signs, the garage sale here signs. I mean, to me the thing is they need to be of temporary use, and they need to be taken in every night. And they so if we have a limited space, a limited usage, then it again comes back to enforcement, and that's the crux of the every code.
Yeah.
But I think there's very legitimate uses for it, and I support them.
The commission's comfortable with regarding A-frame signs in the right-of-way. We allow one per frontage all over the city, no matter where you are.
I think
Is
They
that
create too much clutter.
I guess, see, that's
is that too many, or is that
that's my concern, is that when there were just a few, it's fine. But then so here you've got the public right. Let's talk about downtown specifically, because that's a confined space. You've got people who have merchandise out in their front. You've got people who have tables, and then you have these A-frame signs. So where is the path that you're supposed to be walking when you're having to dot? And that's my big gripe about downtown Portland. They're just everywhere. So everyone has one, so then everybody has one. And you're weaving and dodging, trying to walk, and they have fairly wide sidewalks, not like here. And I'm just thinking, well, you just defeated your whole purpose, because now you just start to ignore them. I mean, after a while, you just don't see them.
Yeah, you get signage overload at some point.
I mean, that's part of the problem. I'm not saying that I like them or I hate them. I'm just saying there's a certain saturation point.
Exactly.
So if everybody's putting one out, and then again, if they put it out, they need to take it in and not leave it out all day and all night. To me, having a nice blade sign as you're walking or driving, that tells me where they are. And if they want to have an open sign in their window or something that says they're open or whatever, to me that's fairly effective. I mean, it just gets to be too much. With the tables, the chairs, the A-frame, the merchandise, everything. And so
I think A-frames should be very limited.
I don't.
How do we do that? I mean, when you say limited, like in terms of
just stay up here.
I don't know. I mean,
You might as well just stay up here.
That's why we're having this discussion,
But
folks.
see, the other side of that is there's parking. An A-frame sign is useless when the street front is fully parked.
Oh, absolutely, because you
So
can't see it.
they don't put them out. I mean,
Well, actually, that's the problem. They do put them out, and they're in the way.
and oh darn, I've knocked over a couple when I opened my door, and I didn't pick them up. Not my problem.
One thing I like about Portland is you have to have a permit, and that could help it be self-limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should. I think they have to. If people want them, they have to be regulated. I mean, it just can't be the Wild West out there, which is what we have right now.
No, and that's why we're having. I mean, it's kind of opened this door with the 7th Street construction, and it took off. So it's either ban them again like we used to, or regulate them.
It could be a public safety factor. hazard. Sight distance, like Damon says. Indoor.
Well, I know you have an opinion about it, so.
Well, I guess I think Main Street is certainly supportive of very prescriptive placement, what have you. And we're also looking at ways to work with property owners to or business owners to put in more permanent signage. So, say for instance, the two new stores that are just opened up, Mirror and
The Flat.
the other one is getting to open up in the Home Life building where Flying Monkey was, for instance. So traditionally, Flying Monkey would pull out a A-frame sign, put it on the corner, and sort of as a mechanism for wayfinding. And so the more permanent solution would be to put a blade sign on the corner of the building, pointing back that way. So that's comment one. So there are ways, carrots that we can sort of work with to help promote better sign usage. But with respect to things in the sidewalk, we have relatively narrow sidewalks, which restricts what we can do in the sidewalks. But there are a number of retail experts, and one that that downtown has worked with in the past and is sort of well respected throughout Oregon, Michelle Reeves. She might suggest that these things in the sidewalks are excellent and amazing because they suggest vibrancy and life, and this place is alive. Not that a slew of A-frame signs represents a place being alive, but I believe in your sign code presentation. Oh no! It was the South End concept plan when you guys put up a picture of dense use. There was an A-frame about every 10 feet.
I saw that.
But I'm not advocating for rampant A-frames, and personally, I would think that the number of A-frames that exist, if you took out the duplicates downtown, so I have one in front of my store and I have one on the corner. If you took out the duplicates, there really aren't that many downtown, and so and especially if you put a permit onto the process, I think the laws of nature will take over, hopefully, and you won't end up with an A-frame every 15 feet. So they're not appropriate for all businesses.
No,
So-
I love the merchandise. I mean, going down the street, I was on my way somewhere and I saw something that they had out and at the this and that, and I looped the block and went in, and so I don't have a problem with that. To me, that's better than having an A-frame out. 'Cause
agreed. Right. Yeah,
seeing
it's show don't tell.
Yeah.
Is the concept.
Exactly.
But and so as a downtown organization, we're going to try and help our businesses understand even more and more how to show and not tell. But with respect to A-frames downtown, our concern is that the frontage or lot line or tax lot frontage isn't necessarily equitable, and that's the only concern that that I found in the code is that for demonstration, 505 is 25 feet wide and it's one property. They can have one A-frame. Bush Furniture is half a block. It's one property. They can have one A-frame, but they represent 5 different businesses in that location.
Then they put the 5 names on the one A-frame.
Potentially, but it is that the consumer doesn't see lot lines. They don't care. So
I'll let you. I'm not interested. I would have very grave concerns about allowing an A-frame for every business on the street.
No, I would.
Yeah, and I do support.
We would lose control.
I do support the idea of requiring a permit for them.
And if they all get a permit on Main Street, then you have exactly what you got. So,
But I also think that what Damon was suggesting is that there is a restriction on how long they can be out there.
Did you put time on there?
We did. We put limitations. So it's different based on if you're residential. It's certain days of the week based on the realtor's schedule. And then also if you're not, I think our current code says 12 hours a day. have to check back to see what the May 12th code.
But I do
12
think,
hours is a long time.
I think with some restriction on how long they can be there, coupled with getting permits, as Jonathan said, it's going to become, it'll discourage the over signage, I think, to
I mean, aren't
a
open
great
houses
extent.
usually for a few hours? Why would they need to have an A-frame sign up for 12 hours?
Well, no,
They're
this is
different
downtown.
for residential.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
We're talking
we can see.
commercial, because
Well, I guess the simple question is, how many are in favor of a permit process? Raise your hand. Let's do a consensus. Okay, well, it looks like that's, irrespective of my opinion, the permit
and,
process
you know,
seems to need to be developed.
Speaking of,
And I'm okay with that.
did you bring it up about the this and that and their sign is out of doors?
Mhm.
I will be honest with you. I think that if we're going to allow them, we need to allow some flexibility. I mean, I thought that was a very clever way that they advertise, and I think his spin-off person who's up on 7th now has something that she put out that's very unique looking. I've seen them where they've been like chalkboard on both sides, where they just erase
The
it every
daily
day
special
or whatever it is. Something like that is unique, and I don't want us to discourage creativity, but yet I also don't want to see the proliferation of those hideous big plastic ones.
So for signs in the right-of-way, we say that the frame has to be wood, plastic, or metal. But we don't, and that's not illuminated and
Yeah,
so
it would
forth.
be illuminated.
We don't get into the
And we don't want them to
interior.
put little flippy flags on the top of them or pinwheels. I saw something on Malala Avenue where they'd taken, weird, Clackamas Federal Credit Union had these little pinwheels out to promote some charity, and somebody took some and put them on top of a sign on Malala Avenue. And I mean, I know they ripped them off. I'm just like, really?
Well, actually, they were giving them away at Clackamas Town Center, the blue pinwheels.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion about plastic? Because I think the most offensive plastic is white. They do make black plastic ones for the same price, I presume. And those are probably a lot less glaring. And that might be a very simple way to reduce the chintziness.
Yeah,
The
those
only
white
problem
ones
is
are bad.
that
I know
the
what you're
plastic tends
talking
to
about.
deteriorate
Yeah.
in sunlight over time, so
Well,
it
they just
might
get dirty and they
faded.
just look
That's the
really
problem
terrible.
with
Yeah.
plastic. But if they're putting it in and out every day, I mean, the other thing is that the big, tall plastic one, those are heavy. Have you ever tried to lug one? That's not fun.
Well, and if there's a permit process and the sign starts to be deteriorated, then you just address it when they come for their permit renewal.
So the permit process now has them come in for signs in the right-of-way. You need a yearly permit.
Perfect.
And we're still
Yeah.
working out the fees, but
Yeah,
if
that's what they do in Portland.
And
they
you
have a
can-
little sticker, and if you don't have your little sticker,
yep. So we would do that. So we
And you
use
can
like
make those subject to maintenance as well. So if they have deteriorated, you can
Well,
you
in
can
a
require
year, they
maintenance.
probably have.
We don't have any maintenance standards in our current code, well, in the current draft, but we do have maintenance standards that are going to be in the May 12th draft. So on the slide, it's at the very bottom that it's clean, you're keeping it free from rust and dirt. If there's any burnt out bulbs, so not for A-frames, but for other signs, you have to replace them, things like that.
Yeah.
So we did hear your suggestion for maintenance, and we did find City of San Jose, thank you for the suggestion, I think it came from them, someone who had a maintenance standard that we actually can use.
The
Great.
other thing that we talked about was, I noticed, are we putting in the new draft, in the next draft, is there going to be some review about enforcement? Because that was something everybody on this group talked about in one form or the other.
So it's not going to be part of our code, but it is a separate issue that we'll be addressing.
Are they going to be going hand in hand?
So we put together options on what kind of enforcement we think is needed to have a good code and to have our code actually be enforced, and for the switch over from the current code to the new code. Since we have so much stuff that is prohibited out there already. So it'll go before the commission and see.
I mean, to be honest with you, something that I've been concerned about, and this is not my favorite topic, and even though I brought it up when we talked about goals for work sessions a year ago, I said, yeah, we need to do something. But with the exception of a few things in our existing sign code that could be added, there really isn't a whole lot that's wrong with our existing sign code. It just was, the whole issue is it was never enforced. After a certain period of time, it was enforced early on, but not later. And I think if we had done that, I don't think we would be in where we are today, other than making some amendments. I mean, yes, I agree about the A-frames, and signage has changed with the flutter flags and stuff, so we'd have to either put stuff in or take stuff out to deal with any new changes in technology, and of course the electronic billboards. But by and large, it was fine.
I think this is very similar.
It's simple.
with those.
It's simple. It was easy to administer, and if we'd just done the follow-up,
Well,
hindsight is
consistent
20/20.
enforcement is always the key to making these codes meaningful. And it's interesting on a completely different subject, but I'd say probably 80% of the applications that we hear for zone changes in here, the big issue is traffic impacts and speed.
Mm-hmm.
And when people talk about speed, it's because the 30-mile-an-hour zone or the 25-mile-an-hour zone is not being enforced, and you got people whizzing through there at 40 or 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. I mean, if we, to use an analogy, if we had parking meters and we didn't have parking enforcement, it's the same. It's the same issue.
Same thing.
It would be, what's the point? It'd be the Wild West out there.
Yep.
And I just don't want to go through this again as a person that lives in this community, because it's like I'm driving down the road and I'm going, and I came down from the hilltop last night and there's a sign at Taco Time that's in their window that's going like this, and I'm like, okay, that's inside, but still, it is a hazard to vehicle navigation, and I know that that's prohibited now, and I know it'll be prohibited later. It's just that little stuff. And going up Malala this afternoon, I was looking at somebody's flutter flags on top of their building. They're all shredded to pieces and fallen off. There's just the little thing sticking out there.
Yeah.
Tony, the issuance of a business license, you do that annually,
Yep, they are. Every
Couldn't you
year.
tie the issuance of a sign permit and compliance thereof to the issuance of a business license?
We talked about including it with the business license application renewal, just a little handout about, by the way, did you know you need to get a sign permit? And
We do that.
Yeah.
Well, as I understand it, then the sign permit's going to come through your department, the issue itself?
The way we do, if you have the only sign we're just potentially going to be renewing yearly would be an A-frame in the public right-of-way. If you have, once we approve your wall sign, you're entitled to it. I think then it becomes, trying to be proactive enforcement if it starts to deteriorate, or that we notice it's, they pop the face out or something, or it's beginning to rust. Then we, proactively would move there. So there's not a lot to tie necessarily to the business license unless they have an A-frame. It's not like I couldn't imagine a situation where a business comes in and we go out and we're going to say, okay, before we renew your business license every year, we're going to go inspect the sign.
No, we just send out a.
We wouldn't. There's not enough manpower to do that.
Just a little letter saying, hey, you need to get a sign permit. You should get a
I'm
sign
still
permit,
for
whatever.
hiring for getting some volunteer minions to go out and do an inventory of our current.
Yeah, I know that you guys are really,
City.
we're limited in our city in terms of services, and
Google Maps.
I just want to make sure that what we're suggesting in this
Isn't gonna
sign
add a
code is
burden.
doable for you guys, and it's simple to administer. And I just want to make sure that we're taking a gut check every once in a while when we're adding all of these mechanisms to the sign code, that we're making sure that you guys aren't overburdened with stuff.
Right, and I agree. I think that the enforcement component of this is the hardest part.
Yeah.
There's an education component that goes along with it, and then the enforcement part of it. And trying to carve that out of a budget, is one of the things I'm trying to do.
Right. We'll make money. I mean, I could see, of course, time permitting, going to a chamber meeting, obviously, going to meet with the downtown merchants, and then having some kind of maybe every 6 months you have a session where, if you need a sign permit or you have questions about the sign permit, you could come in, during business hours, and it would be, this would be sign code central, and, maybe people could get some free help.
Yeah, I think the problem is it's more going out and dealing with someone who's not going to come in. They're 95% of what we deal with.
Right.
It's going out and starting the code enforcement process on someone who's put up 15 signs, none of which are legal.
Sure.
Refuses to respond to a letter to desist.
Mhm. Right.
Then you're in a court. It's a 6-month commitment of tracking, documenting.
Those things take time.
They do,
Oh,
and it is
A
a
lot of
huge time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're hoping cooperation with the chamber, education, whether it be putting in the Trail News, associating something in the business license when it goes out, or the renewal about signs, signage, proper signage, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Hopefully we get self-compliance, 50, 60%.
Yeah.
At least try to reduce the number that we've then got to go out and
It's
actively
to their benefit
find.
because, maybe there's some way that like you said, you're putting in some carrots, but, I think too, where you have a real estate sign and then the next thing you do, you go by and somebody's appropriated for their own business sign. They've covered it over and you're like, wait a minute, that wasn't there.
Yeah, but that's for the business to go.
Do we have any regulations that will eventually apply to projected signs? I.e. the sign being projected, the image being projected on the elevator?
It's not a
So those
sign.
Signs in the right of way.
There was a sign in the right of way.
What's that?
That was a sign in the right of way.
The elevator.
The elevator is right of way.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well,
Government
what I'm
signs
thinking
are
about-
exempt.
Okay, so I'm owner of Building A, and across the street's Building B.
Right.
And I'm gonna project my sign across the street onto his facade.
Like a
You
bat
know,
signal?
Wall sign.
One of
Yeah.
these days, somebody's gonna do it.
You mean like a bat signal?
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you met our
That sign.
standards for brightness at property lines too, if properties can only be so bright, then it sounds like a wall sign.
Well, and that's the thing, is we just need to make that statement that a projected sign on any face is considered to be a wall sign. So if somebody wants to go and do the laser that spells out their name and sale 50%, like the rock.
Well, I think we catch it. Sign means any sign, display message, emblem, figure, painting, drawing, placard, poster, billboard, carving, or other thing that is designed, used, or intended to convey a message or image that is used to inform or attract
That's-
attention.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty hard to.
So if I put on the side of the building that I love Damon Maybe, I can't put that up?
You can, as long as it meets the wall
Wall
sign.
sign, okay, there you go.
So,
Well, it's content neutral, so
Noodle?
it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter what it says.
Am I projecting that on
It
my
doesn't
building?
matter what it says.
Okay, all right.
Now,
I
if
think
the-
we would catch. I mean, if someone wanted to come in and say my advertisement is going to be I'm going to put my strobe light out in my parking lot and shine it on my blank wall, I think we would still, under that definition,
I think
consider
strobes
that.
are not allowed because they
well, they actually, yeah.
they flash.
But I mean, if they
and-
were to just have a floodlight
Yeah.
with some type of an emblem
Well, like
on
they
it.
used to do, where they had the searchlights
things
that used
bouncing
to
all over the
go
place.
all- Based on your current slide here, you have legal non-conforming signs should be removed with damage expenses 50% plus of the cost of the sign. Cost of the sign when? When it was erected or
The
currently?
day before the damage occurred. It's not, sorry, that's a general.
Yeah, and that's-
So
I
regarding,
understand what that
last time I
means.
met with you, our current code
Mhm.
says, doesn't have this standard in there. So we added this standard that says
Right.
if it gets damaged and the damage means that the sign is worth half of what it was the day before, then it's
So
gotta
it-
come.
It's
so
your
go away.
typical.
50%
It's your
of
kind of your
current
typical
cost.
non-conforming threshold. If you have a non-conforming use in your house and your business burns down and it's less than 50%, you can rebuild. If it's more than 50%, it's a loss.
So it burns down or gets hit
Right,
by
but
a
I'm just
car.
saying it's 50% of the current cost of the sign, not I erected it in 1930 and it only
Yeah.
cost me $8.
Oh, that's what she just said. the day
Yes, no,
before.
thank you. That's a very good question. We
Right,
did
well,
it the
that's
day
what I
before.
was, yeah,
Mhm.
okay, that's fine.
And then also we put in some suggestions about signs which emit
Yeah.
any sound, vibration, smell.
That was a
Um,
couple slides back, yeah.
We had a request about signs in the right of way that they're tied to the use of the property, not the zoning designation. So from the TAC, they were concerned that if you have a sign in a residential zone, you can only have it up very limited amount of hours. But if you have a legal non-conforming business within a residential zone, you can't have it up as much as you could if it were in a business zoning designation. So we changed the time to match.
I don't think that's right. If you're a non-conforming use and you're in some other zone, that's your choice. You're there. If you want to have a bigger sign and longer hours, then you can move to another area
But the
where
zone might have changed around you,
that's
not.
too bad, so sad.
Too bad, so sad that the government just took away your ability to do your business.
The government didn't take away.
If they changed the zoning, the government took it away.
Okay, let's not get into taking because we can be here
That's
all
exactly
night.
what
No,
it's about.
It isn't.
Do you want me to take that out and to tie the hours of? So this is just signs in the right of way. Remember, if they're in commercial zones, they're 12 hours a day. If they're in residential zones, it's very specific times on basically the weekend, Monday.
I guess I
through-
need an example.
Do you? What's that?
I guess I'd need an example.
The bakery on Central Point
Mhm.
is a non-conforming business,
Which has been there
and
for 60 plus years.
So, if they wanted to have a sign in the right of way, so if they wanted to have an A-frame sign on private property, good, they're allowed to do that.
Right.
That's fine. So this is only in the right of way. They would be allowed to place the sign. The property next door that's residential would only be allowed to place an A-frame sign on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday between noon and 8 p.m. daily, so they have to take it in, and from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Tuesdays. Then, because they're a business, if it were tied to the business, the use of the property, not the zoning designation, they would be allowed to place it 12 hours a day every day.
Are they open 12 hours a day?
It's just a maximum. So we can't tie it to the hours that they're open because you'd have to read the sign.
I'm
and
assuming
read the-
business hours. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I think that's when people talk about business hours, it's either 8 to 5 or it's 9 to 5 or it's 8 to 6. I mean, that's.
So in our current code, we did a maximum of 12 hours a day because there were concerns of a bar or something that wants to have an A-frame out with their drink specials and they're open later at night. So we just did a maximum hours per day rather than
You don't
a
want
specific time.
Stumbling on. I guess I just have a hard time with exception. So when does it stay the exception and when does it become the rule?
So we can change it back to what this draft says, or we can, whatever you
I mean,
guys
we're talking
like.
about a specific thing, and I'm looking at the sign code as trying to equitably apply to everyone.
So, I mean, this was the recommendation that we received, so we're bringing it forward, so we're looking for a little bit of guidance here on what you guys would like. We're not tied to either one.
Yep, that was just a recommendation from TAC.
Well, if you're establishing a maximum number of hours a day that applies equitably to everyone, then that's pretty evenly applied.
Well, it's either by use or by
Well,
zoning.
Zone.
Well, it's either by residential or business, right?
Yeah.
So this would be a business that's pre-existing, legal, non-conforming in a residential zone. So the house next door can only have it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Tuesday. But if you're the bakery next door, you're zoned R10 as well, or whatever it is, they could have it for 12 hours a day, 7 days.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. The question I would have is, what about the CPA operating out of his house? Is he a residence or is he a business when he puts his CPA shingle out?
If it's a home occupation, it's the residential, so he
Okay.
wouldn't.
As
But he
long
could
as
have it
that's
on his own
covered.
private property.
Yeah.
So my neighbor who has a business part-time can have an A-frame sign under this code in his yard?
Yes.
In his yard.
Because you get
On
two
private.
ancillary signs, so if you want one to be an A-frame or both to be an A-frame, you can. If you want a flag and an A-frame or something, some
See,
combination.
To me, that completely disregards the nature of a residential zone. If you have a home occupation, there should be very little telltale sign that you are operating a home occupation there. because it's supposed to be a residential zone, not a business zone. They have a sign on their house, you know, some discrete size that says, I'm doing, you know, flower arranging. That's fine, but to have it out in their yard, I moved to a residential zone because I want to live in a residential zone. I don't want to be in a business zone. If I move in a condo downtown, that's going to be different. I don't think we should be letting businesses who are home occupations have A-frame signs in their yard on private property. It should be on their house, and that's it. It's a residential zone. The purpose of them being there is to live there, not to have the business. The business is ancillary.
Part of it is also driven by real estate signs too. Since we're at content neutral, if you get your
I actually agree with Denise.
But they're temporary. The
Yeah,
real
but-
estate sign is going to be there. The house is for sale, or they're having an open house. It's going. It's coming. It's going. It's not going to be there.
I don't think they ought to be in front of residences either.
Yeah, I think that of all the things that zoning should protect more than anything else, it's our residential zones. They're very fragile, and you can get somebody with a very garish looking sign. I agree with Denise. I think that we got to draw the line somewhere.
I mean, I'm having a little bit of heartburn because a lot of the churches are doing more than just having church services, and they have, you know, St. Baldrick's Day Festival, this thing, this supper, that thing, and all these little signs go out, but they don't stay out. They come and they go.
Is it
You know?
just A-frame signs, or what about any kind of semi-permanent signs?
I think if we have something in the code, I think in our current code we have for a home occupation, you can have it was some sort of
2 by 2
discrete
or
size
something, yeah.
that they could have on their house that says, like I said, you know, let's say I do flower arranging as an ancillary use to my, you know, I could have a little sign on my house.
It's 20 square feet.
Yeah, so
In this new code, we reduced the maximum size for freestanding signs from 20 to 12.
well, I'm just talking about the one that's on the house for home occupation specifically.
On any residential property.
Right.
That's not multifamily.
But see, that, I think the distinction is, what you're talking about is the sign on the house. But what Denise is talking about is the A-frame out in the front yard.
Or the freestanding
Standing sign,
Or
which
the
in a
freestanding
residential
flag.
zone, you know,
And I agree that, you know, you want to allow the freedom for people to sell their house or to have a garage sale or something like that. But I would agree that we don't want to necessarily have a business sign out there every day of the week in their front yard.
The sign cannot be detached from the house, it would seem. If it's detached, then it's separate, and it's away from the house, it'd be on the right-of-way or be on the front lawn, and that goes beyond the residential zone, it would seem to me.
So right now, we do allow a 20 square foot freestanding sign in residential property. And do we want to take that away so it's just a wall sign for residential property? And then in this proposed code, we allow 2 ancillary signs, which is a sign less than 6 square feet per face. So, you know, A-frame or a flag
so
or
we're not,
something.
so I guess the question I'm asking is, are we differentiating? So in residential zones, we have churches, we have this, we have lots of conditional uses in residential zones generally.
Their
Are
own
we,
code.
right, are we separating, what I'm talking about specifically is someone who has a home occupation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about them having a 10 by 10 wall sign.
Mm-hmm.
How does that keep the zone residential? I mean, that doesn't. If there, I mean, our home occupation code.
We're not saying a 10 by 10. We're saying a 4 by.
You said 20 square feet.
Well, that's
Our code
sometimes
now
5 by
allows
2.
our code now allows a 20 square foot wall
That's
or
2 foot by
freestanding
10.
sign on residential property. In this proposed code, we reduced it from 20 to 12.
So
It's
what
just-
does our home occupation
It's
section
3
say?
foot by 4 foot.
It just says you have to meet sign code. There's no difference between if you have a home occ or don't have a home occ signage on residential property. The standards are the
No,
same.
not more than one wall sign or freestanding sign to be visible from each frontage with no more than 3 frontages. Wall signs shall be measured by the outer limits. Maximum 20 square feet of area per sign face, not to exceed 10 feet in height.
That matches our sign code.
So I'm still trying to get back to why would someone in an R10 zone who has a house need a freestanding sign?
Well, I can think of like a hospice or a group home, and they're just using it as an indicator.
I mean, if it's set back from the street by a driveway, or just it's an older home so it has a large front yard, they may need a sign to indicate that this is the place, because you can't see it. I mean, I could think of several homes in the McLaughlin
Well,
district
they're,
that because
having
of
their street numbers and stuff on a little sign in their houses, that's fine. I'm just, I don't want a residential district to be proliferated with signs on people's front lawns.
Well,
if
but-
it's a business sign, or
but-
if it's,
But how many home walks are happening? I mean, they're not. All of 6th Street is not full of home walks. There
No.
might be one on the entire length
That's
of 6th
true.
Street. So one little sign in their front yard is not a clutter.
I think having it in their front yard at all is a clutter. If they want to have a home occupation and they want to advertise, it should be on their house, and that's it, and it
So
should
how
be
about
very
if
discreet.
so how about if we come back at our next meeting, we'll have two proposals, one similar to what's written now, and one taking into consideration what we've heard about not allowing A-frames on private property in the residential zone for home ocks, and we'll write up some draft.
Anything other than a wall sign.
We'll write up some draft regulation. You guys can think about it a little bit, and then have a look at the regulation and make a decision at our next meeting.
Well, I would throw a caveat into that, is that you do need to address the temporary sign for real estate and garage sales and that
I know
type
it's
of
hard
thing.
in the content neutral context, but we'll let us take a whack at it and see what it looks like.
Well, I mean, if you say, not to be up for more than 7 days, so that lets the real estate agent put his sign up.
Well, the problem is when you have a for sale sign for a home, it's going to
Yeah.
be up for 6 months.
It could be.
We worked on this
Usually
with
90
our
days, but-
community advisory team, tried to address this issue and figure out if there should be a maximum timeline for residential for signs. And
I just wish we could go back to what we used to do, which was we exempted, certain signs were exempt because they were considered temporary, like real estate sales signs, garage sale signs, political signs in residential and commercial areas. If they were temporary, it's just like we have 4th of July.
You know why we can't.
We don't allow them, we don't, fireworks sales, you have a certain time period you can sell the fireworks, and then you have to take your stuff down.
Next, you're going to ban my Christmas lights in June.
Hey, Zach, I'm over at your house tomorrow. We're
Well-
taking them down.
Well, but that also gets to.
They're they're just lights. They're not advertising. Are you advertising your Christmas lights? With a flashing sign?
Some people do. I mean, have you not seen the YouTube videos where people do the music and the lights, and and they do it very specifically to draw people to their property?
That's National Lampoon.
No. But anyway.
I missed that one.
so, any more comments for the next draft?
No
Just
A-frames.
keep them coming to us, or maybe to Tony, and we'll see you on
Maybe.
May 12th.
What do you mean, maybe?
I don't know if I'll be
Well-
here May 12th, but
Well,
just
all I
like to
got to
see
say
the
is,
floodgates opening here.
all I got to say is, you guys have done a great
Great
job with all the bazillions of different
Yeah.
punching blows and crazy changes and reversals.
We're only hitting
And-
you.
No. So, thank you. I appreciate the heck
Thanks for
out
that.
of everything you guys are going through. Especially in your condition, where you're like, ah.
She actually has
My
more
condition's
brain
fine.
power
Oh,
because she's got extra mojo going on.
I noticed your hairline's receding a little bit.
Don't talk about him like that.
Very distinguished people have receding hairlines. There's nothing wrong with that.
I didn't say there was
Okay,
anything wrong.
All right, thank you.
are we done with the sign
Yeah.
agenda?
I think
Oh,
so. Yeah.
So Tony, do we have any communications?
What's going on with Mega Rock?
So today was the
I
overbid
love
date. I have not had an update on where we're at. I imagine we'll probably see something filed with the courts in the next couple days in terms of what the next steps will be. So we are waiting to have the opportunity to sit down with Mega Rock or whoever the successful bidder is for the property, if there is one. So we're still kind of
waiting. Under Mega Rock's original proposal, I think they had wanted to close on May 7th or May 8th, something like that. So,
And is the Blue Heron property now part of the Metro Parks funding list?
it is part of the Willamette area. Willamette area along the Willamette River has been added to the local share acquisition list.
Yeah.
So if an opportunity for property along the Willamette River comes up, we would have the opportunity to use the Metro Open Space Local Share. So when Metro passed their bond measure in 2006, it included a portion where a local match was sent to the local jurisdiction. So we had a little of just under $1 million. But as part of that, the City Commission and then Parks and Rec Advisory Committee made a recommendation to the City Commission of targeted areas. So they had identified 4. So we supplemented that and added the Willamette River area as a potential purchase area.
Since it's come up since that process.
So as you said, we will only be having one meeting in May unless are you throwing one in on the 19th or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think we're, with the continuance for the Portland Men's Center, we were potentially going to need one, but with the continuance and the extension of the 120, we've got sufficient time now
Okay.
for that June hearing.
Anything exciting coming up for the 12th?
What's on the 12th?
Exciting is
Sign
subjective.
code?
It's subjective, you know,
I
I'm
don't
saying
know.
exciting. It's all exciting.
I think I have a. Do we have another? The Myers Road zone change? But I don't think that's till June.
Oh, it is Pete's. Is it the one in Park Place zone change?
Oh yeah.
On May 12th?
On May 12th, yes. Another zone change.
Cool.
In the elementary school.
Oh, we're going to zone Tom's
Buying
area
the
R4?
elementary school?
Off Ames.
Somebody's wants to buy the
Behind
elementary?
it,
Oh,
sorry.
behind. Oh, I
Behind.
thought you
Up
said
on
someone was
Ames
buying
Street.
the elementary school.
Yeah. That's all I have.
That it?
That's it.
Okay.
Bang
Well,
that gavel.
we're adjourned.
All right, so I can take the 26th off my calendar.
That is Memorial Day, I believe.